Hi, this is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is listening beyond the sound bites. I'm all by myself in the studio today. Ben is probably watching the Boston Marathon as we speak, but I have a guest, and the guest is Matt Musgrave from the Associated General Contractors, titled Deputy Executive Vice President. I like the title. Very nice.
Well, when they were hiring me, they wanted me to feel like I was very important, so I got 4 words in my title.
Well, that's a cool thing. That's a very big business card. That's good. Matt and I talked at an event. You are the chair of the Central Vermont Rotary?
I'm the chair of the Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce
Chamber of
for
Commerce.
2022.
Oh, I'm sorry, Betsy, sorry. Yeah, we went to an event honoring Bob Nelson, and that was lovely. And the reason we love Bob, but I was also been following around the sailors from the USS Vermont, and we did a couple of shows on them, and so that's why we were there. But you did an excellent job, and you're stepping down soon.
Well, I've got the rest of this year, and when I was appointed chair back in January at the annual meeting, I was very clear about what my number one mission was going to be. Serving the chamber was to find my replacement.
Oh, you said that when you were talking. I thought, well, the man's on a mission.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about volunteer boards and chambers and everything like that. I think the most important thing for leadership to do is foster the growth, and that starts with growing your membership. That starts with getting them to volunteer on committees and task force and come to chamber or board events. Right. And ultimately what you're trying to do is create the next generation of leadership. And that's really the goal is, I would love to be chair forever, but that's not how a
Don't let them hear you say that, it'll be yours.
That's not how a Chamber of Commerce works. We're there to create leaders within our territories.
New blood, new ideas. That's a very active chamber. I always, when I was working, I'd always kind of tag along and participate. It's great. That and the Montpelier Rotary, I think, are the two that I've been most involved with, but good for you.
We were very lucky. We hired Kevin Eschelbach, joined us as the CEO and president a few years ago, and he's done some great things and really grown membership and created new programs, so we're really happy.
Excellent. Well, but we are here to talk about AGC and your role there, and the reason and we'll get to that in a minute, you were talking a lot about the struggles that we're having here in Vermont, and I think in the nation about the workforce. Where are the people? And we summered in Maine. We summer in Maine, and last year I started noticing in Maine restaurants were closing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, you know the story. I mean, there's nobody working. So you were talking about that at that event, and I said, oh, we must chat.
Yeah,
because it's a serious problem.
Well, that's the $65,000 question, as they would have said, but it's probably more like a $65 million question if you look at the legislature and what the spending is that's going into that world. Yeah. Whether it's getting money into education programs, creating systems for people to be able to buy homes in Vermont, to attract them to Vermont. Yep. So it is the $65 million question today. Where are all those folks? Anecdotally. You see it in the ski lift line. I was hearing it all winter long. I mean, people's cultures have changed in the last 2 years where you may have had, both people in the family were going to work. Now some people are choosing to stay at home and look at different pieces that they're doing. So we're puzzled where everybody is. And, we hear a constant statistic here in the state of Vermont that we had, depending on who you talk to, between 24 and 29,000 people leave the workforce on a semi-permanent basis.
I wonder, I mean, I'm retired and I work a little, just that extra income, you need it. And may I just tell you all, no matter how much you think you have for retirement, that you have enough, it isn't, just to tell you. But that's the way it goes. And now that the economy is, we're struggling paying for things, you need extra money. But there's just nobody wanting, I don't know how they survive. They must be doing something off the books. Something is different.
Well, in some of these, and these are the ski lift lines I'm talking about here. So in those situations, I was often hearing, conversations of a trailing spouse deciding not to stay in the workforce and maybe stay at home. Trailing spouse is a term we used when I was selling real estate. You generally would have one person that would move to get a job at UVM or somewhere working for the state, and then you'd have the trailing spouse that would come, and they would find work, but the purpose for moving to Vermont was for the individual. So what I'm hearing in those ski lift lines, in those conversations is, when you start dealing with the unpredictability of like childcare, for example, where one child in the school comes in with a cough and everybody goes home, that's disrupting somebody's employment. They now have to go home. And you look at that cost, the opportunity cost that they have to go to work and then be disrupted at work. And, when you start looking at the disruption at work, some of the federal tax credits for children and stuff like that, for some people it made more sense to stay at home, but I don't necessarily know. Maybe they weren't people that were headed for construction, because we look at it a little bit different than this 2-year hole that we've been in from this coronavirus. This is a historical challenge that we've dealt with in the trades long before I was with the association. And when you look at it, and it's a great thing, more and more people are going to 4-year schools, more and more people are becoming involved with technology. But all of that rests and lies on the roads, bridges, and infrastructure to run all of that stuff. So what we are doing now at the AGC is really trying to pivot to focus heavily on that workforce and try to create an opportunity for people that they maybe didn't know existed. And when we look at those jobs and we look at the outcomes, I just came from the AGC office where we were performing an OSHA 10, which the OSHA 10 is it's generally the introduction course for safety to work in the trades. And, there are young people there where, early 20s, that their outcomes from getting into the trades or getting into construction of some way, shape, or form, they're buying new cars and talking about buying houses. So the outcomes are great.
That's great.
We just need more people to hear about it.
Right. That's great. Well, I've gotten a little ahead of myself because I didn't even talk about you yet and AGC. So could you give us a 2-minute of your background and also about AGC? I said Associated General Contractors of Vermont, but it's way more than that.
It is. So, my background, I grew up working in the real estate industry. I sold homes for about 17 years. During that time, I worked with recruiting agents. I worked in the development industry, working with home builders, helping them identify places to build homes and developments, and really started to become interested in the politics that laid behind that, because we have several development laws that are very famous in Vermont, Act 250 being one of them, that I learned about and became a volunteer advocate for the association that I belonged to at the time. And eventually I was volunteering down here in Montpelier so much, coming to talk to our legislative friends, that they offered me a job. So it was, to leave the sales piece and then work in political advocacy for the trade association that represents the real estate agents. And I did that for several years and enjoyed it. And the opportunity came up over at the AGC, and I took advantage of it. And
That's great.
I moved over about 4 years ago now, and it's been great. It's a good group of people to work with. I've learned a lot. Coming from the real estate world, there were independent contractors were running their own businesses. Now I work in the workforce world where we have employees, and you have to think about the outcomes of the people that you work with a lot differently.
And you've got a lot more people in your association, more trades in your association than I thought. There was a laundry list of all of the people that are part of AGC. And I don't know what I was thinking. I just figured contractors, but insurance companies, bonding firms, anybody that really deals with construction can join your association.
Right, so, municipalities. We even have a couple of ski areas that take advantage of our services for the safety trainings.
That's great. And you're right here no, it's Middlesex, right? Or
we're in Montpelier, technically.
Montpelier, okay.
Right over on Bridge Street.
Yeah, right by the creamy stand, so there you go. So can you talk a little bit about what AGC's goals are and what you're trying to accomplish besides the advocacy, of course? Yeah,
well, so it's a multi-legged stool, I guess. So on one side we have the political advocacy. As I just mentioned, we were really amping it up this year with the workforce development piece. We hired a workforce development director and a lot of stuff that I'll get into more
Yeah,
detail
please.
about
Right.
in a minute. And then we also do consulting work. So when a company decides to grow or merge, or they need some help dealing with the regulators, that's another place that we come in to help them out as well. I think one of the biggest missions that we have is creating a system and working with all the different contractors, working with the agencies, and working with the public, so that we're able to deliver those services to the state, whether it be a road or a commercial building or even someone's home.
That's great. You mentioned a whole bunch of I was a commissioner of labor for a while, and one of the biggest things that we were trying to deal with, when you hire somebody, a couple from outside, we hire a gentleman or a woman to come in to work for your company, the other spouse may or may not be looking for a job, and that's always a problem in Vermont. Or the big thing is finding a home that they can afford, and it's hard here in Vermont to find both those things, employment for the spouse and a home that's in well, I think they're all nice neighborhoods here in Vermont, but something that they can afford. It's tough.
Well, you're right. I mean, supply of workforce affordable housing,
Right.
It's not a new issue.
Nope.
It's a long-standing issue that we've had, and it's only been compounded because of whatever they call the COVID refugees that have moved in. But really, I mean, our increase in people moving to Vermont wasn't that significant, actually, when you look at the statistics. But what did happen in Vermont in terms of housing was we had the lowest interest rates that we've had in history,
Oh.
ever since I was ever involved with real estate. That brought more people into the market that had ever been there before. And
Now, that's new information. I've never heard that. So why, thank God we had it, but why? What caused it?
well, if you go back, and I lived through the 2007, 2008 downturn in our real estate market, and that's when interest rates were up around the 6-7%.
Right.
And whether it was through national economics that I don't understand, or
Yeah.
or our motivation to get more people borrowing to reactivate the real estate
Wow.
market. When I left selling homes, and this was now 7 years ago, when I left selling homes, interest rates were just now then getting down to around 3%, and at their lowest, they got to around 1.9%. And that's an interesting statistic because it's in that industry, it's known that a bank generally doesn't profit from a mortgage loan under 2% of an interest rate. When you think about all the administrative
I'm sorry, do
costs.
that again. What did you?
So
gotta
it's-
let it sink in here.
It's understood that a mortgage bank
Right.
lending under 2% interest rates generally aren't profiting off the mortgages when you take away all the administrative and regulatory
sure,
costs that go
yeah.
into that.
Interesting.
So what that did was spur a lot of people that previously wouldn't have been able to make that leap into the home buying market. So
Right.
now when you go back 8 or 9 years, that hot workforce property that was close to the employers that everybody wanted,
Right.
you'd get a few offers on it. Now I'm consoling my real estate agent friends because they're getting 15 to 16 offers on
Whoa.
a property, and they're losing bids, and they have upset buyers. So that's my take on what's going on in Vermont.
Nice.
So you had the increased demand that was generated as a result of those low interest rates, but our housing stock has been fairly stagnant.
Yeah.
I mean, you in Chittenden County, you have some small projects that go up, the occasional condo project and such, but we're not seeing the supply of housing keep up with the demand, and that's largely based on the fact that developers are afraid to take risks because some of the regulatory challenges that we deal with.
And I think our housing stock is old, too.
Correct.
Well, and that takes a little bit of money to refurbish and make it lovely.
Yep.
So,
well, and then
that's
all the
another
energy
issue.
components to
Yeah,
that
right,
as well.
exactly.
The state's looking at around 110 or 120,000 homes that they would like to weatherize over the next 10 years
Right.
to keep up with their environmental plans.
I'm going to ask you completely off the subject here, but weatherization, does that, I'm going to ask a very obvious question, does that really make a major difference in a home? Do you see the results of weatherization?
So when you're talking about a home that was built in the 90s,
Right.
very, very minimal.
Yeah.
But when you think about Vermont's housing stock, and
that.
a huge percentage of it is
Right.
over 60 years old,
Yep.
that's where you can make those inroads. Because back when those homes were built, engineering practices were much different. There wasn't a lot of there wasn't a lot of thought for the emissions, and fuel was very inexpensive back then. And you may or may not remember there was an electric renaissance back in the early 80s.
Right.
So with all that, a lot of those homes, they do need to be updated to get in line with today's standards, because people are more conscious of it, and you know, we now have state law that's pushing us in that direction.
Yeah, because when we first moved into our home, it was a 1978 home, all electric. The very first week we were there, we pulled out all the electric and put in a System 2000, whatever it was back then. It was the newest and greatest way to heat your home. But I can see that there's a lot of things escaping from our home, like heat.
Right.
You know,
well, and
so
that's a priority that Vermont's had for a while, to try to do that. And I think where it makes sense is where someone is paying way too much for a heat bill and or consuming too much. And I think, you know, there's the state's taking efforts to try to make money available to folks, but again, it becomes challenging because of the availability of contractors, the ability for, you know, especially now, even if you were to offer somebody a $5,000 grant, for example, to go weatherize their house, and the bill was $20,000.
Where do you get that?
Most people don't have the extra $15,000 to make that difference up, nor do they want to borrow that money because, oh my gosh, I'm paying $4.20 for gas right now.
Right. So. So let's just talk a little bit about the construction industry, because you all must be suffering a little bit these days with costs. I was reading all the stuff I read in researching for the show. It's the supply chain. We've heard about that in almost every industry. The cost of materials, labor. I mean, where are you guys at? How is it going?
So I don't want it to sound doom and gloom, because it's not. We are a very adaptable industry and very resourceful. What we're dealing with right now is, between the American Rescue Plan and the Infrastructure and Jobs Act money that's come out, we're seeing a much higher outlay from the state in terms of their roads and bridges. You know, just before I came over here, I was looking at the budget difference between fiscal year 20 and 23. And we've gone up almost $300 million in terms of that budget. The roads and bridges are getting historical amounts of money, around $700 million when you talk about the state match and the federal funds that are coming in. That's good news.
Yeah, for sure.
On the other side of it, and you sent a stat to me earlier when we were talking about the employment, the page that I gave you has a typo on it. We're actually around 16,000 employees right now in Vermont. I'm not sure where that came from, but you know, if you look at the bar graph, the line graph on the bottom, it says 10,000, but it's actually on the 16 line. We're around 16,000 employees in the construction business right now throughout the state of Vermont, and that's been our average level. If you actually go back and look at what we've had since the market crash back in 2008, we kind of built back up to 16,000, but our peak prior to the last recession was close to 20,000 people in our industry. Wow. So with that, the challenge that we're dealing with, I'll start with the staffing side, is the median age of a construction worker is 55 to 60 years old. So we have a lot of people that are retiring every single year, and we just simply don't have them coming in the other end. We have a loss of the state population. More people are moving out than are moving in. Young people are leaving on a fairly regular basis. And some of those green shoots, like people getting into technology and things like that, have maybe changed that individual that may have chose to go to the trades. So we're having to do, that's something we have a little control over in terms of the ability to get out there, meet with schools, meet with tech programs, get in front of young people and teach them about the outcomes. So that's a good thing, and we're working hard on that. But overall, you know, someone asked us, we did a summit the other day with one of the legislative committees in transportation, was the question was posed, do you have the staff to work with these funds that are coming out? And the answer is yes. You know, whether it's a company will be aggressive and get out there and adopt people from other industries, or will companies team up together? And so, like I said, the industry is very resourceful in that means. So we can work with the personnel problem, but we do have the underlying issue of replacing people that are leaving.
Well, when I was in labor, the big issue was the age of the construction worker. Back was a couple of years ago, and they were pretty much like around my age and out there swinging a hammer. You need the younger people to fill back those jobs.
Well, and we're trying to do it in different ways too. So in addition to our normal group of people that we're out there marketing to, we're trying to create more opportunities for people that maybe wouldn't have considered construction in the past, and namely women haven't considered construction in the past. It's a rough and tumble business. It's something that, you know, I'm sitting here in a blazer in a TV studio, and I'm comfortable doing this, but I'm personally not someone that would be comfortable out on the edge of the roof. So it is a rough and tumble business, but it's been improving over the years with technology, and we've at AGC have worked with some different programs to create scholarships for our member companies to buy personal protective equipment. Like, for example, we had a program to buy safety harnesses for fall protection that were specifically designed around women, because
excellent, good
you
for
know,
us.
the bodies are a little different.
Right.
so we're trying to figure out ways to create more inroads for people who maybe wouldn't have considered construction as a trade.
As a source, the Vermont Tech VTC and those programs, do they come out of there a lot?
Yeah,
I hope.
Absolutely. No, they're great feeder chains for us, and the same with the career technical education centers as well. The challenge is we can't grow more people. Like, we can't just will more people into those programs. So there's that's where we're trying to go out. The statistic, you know, is 50% of people are going off to a 2 or a 4-year school. The other 50%, their outcomes aren't generally well known. So we're trying to get in front of those generally not well known outcomes, and it's always easy to show them the hard work and the pride of being in the industry, being able to look at something that you built that's going to be there for hundreds of years. I mean, look at the State House as an example. But the other side of it is that outcome piece. What does it mean to me? What's in it for me? And also with especially the younger generation, looking at, you know, what's in it for me? What's the outcome? What's my path? But does my company care about me?
Well, you guys put out on your website, which is excellent, by the way, there was a career roadmap, a career path that really laid out, if you want to get in construction, here's your path, that it's not just that entry-level job. You can really move up the ladder and move around and try different things, and there is a career out there, and a well-paying career, I might add. Well, I think the average construction wage in Vermont is around $65,000. So, which is not too shabby. That you're doing well in Vermont. For me, to go to tech ed, it's 2 years. It's probably half the cost of college. You get a trade, you get a skill that when you graduate, you start out with making darn good money in a well-respected field. So. Well, with or without the tech school too, you know, our members have been working very hard on creating their own internal programs, whether they call it an apprenticeship or whether they call it the ladder. And they'll train. They're training. And you're paid while you're training. So they're very happy to do all that training themselves as well. That's great. So how about the old supply chain we've been hearing about, particularly from Los Angeles, and things are just, we just asked for a bid on a half of our roof that needs to be shingled. We were a little surprised by the increase in cost and that it's going to take a while to get the shingles. What is that? Well, you probably are talking about asphalt shingles, so you've got two major challenges there. So one is the production of asphalt materials, which we're dealing with. The other is the actual supply chain and getting it to you. And it's bad. It's bad everywhere, right? It's challenging. You know, when we look out at costs, I mean, you look at diesel fuel. Diesel fuel's up 237%. That's huge. You know, steel prices are at 113% of what they were. And right on down the line, everything that we have that we're tracking is going up. And there's a number of reasons to it. And one of the challenges, particularly here in Vermont, is we produce none of these materials. So you go to states that, you know, are in steel production, they have better access to some of those materials than we do here in Little Vermont. We don't produce a lot of the chemicals that are used in asphalt or concrete production, those cements, you know, whether it's the cement that's used for concrete that's based in natural gas, or you know, the liquid asphalt that we use for the black tar roads. I mean, all that comes in from out of state, and it's compounded by the fact that, you know, their basic chemicals are challenged, their workforce is slim,
They get it out the door at an increased cost. And then now we're talking about our per mile fee. One of our concrete producers actually pointed out that, getting a shipping container from China went up from about $2,500 per container to $20,000 per container.
Whoa.
And there's some great documentaries out there right now on the supply chain. When you look at the port in Long Beach, which I've been to recently,
Right.
you look out in that port and there's hundreds of huge, giant
Just sitting there,
freighters
right?
just sitting
Right.
there waiting to unload. And last year, Joe Biden opened up that port for 24 hours. It was previously a one shift port, and the amount of work it took for them to open up that port was significant. Because if you think about all the different management groups that lie within, you have the dock workers union, you have the security
Right,
union,
right.
you have the police, you have the people that are working in the shipping side of it, and you had to get them all to agree on how, when,
Right,
and what
right.
processes to use to get their products out the door, and they were understaffed. And then we'll talk about CDLs. That's probably
Right.
one of the most
The trucks.
in-demand businesses
Right,
right there.
right.
And that encompasses every part of our industry. I can't deliver an excavator across the street without a CDL driver.
Really.
Well, I guess across the street is a little bit.
You guys would work it out. Yeah, but no, you need it for everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband, he's 78, and he has a CDL, and he won't give it up because you never know. You never know. And there's a big shortage. And I tell you, when I worked at Motor Vehicles, we were changing from IFTA to RIFTA to IFTA. It was an international licensing deal. I was so impressed with what truck drivers have to know. They are running a mini complicated business in that cab of their truck. It's not just driving a truck. They have to know everything. And it's a great occupation.
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised that there's a shortage.
Well, what you just said is a barrier. It's something, a
Right.
piece of feedback that I hear a lot from people, that when they get the CDL, they didn't realize all the logs, the travel time restrictions, the fact that, if one of your lights fails and you get pulled over, you
Yep.
get a ding on your light.
Yep.
Like, you just one of those little red lights on the back.
Well, and it's every town. It's
Yeah.
not even just states. It's towns. And you have to know every single law, every single regulation.
Go try to drive through
Yeah.
Queechee on Route 4 and tell me how that goes.
Don't go with Route 4. Route 4 is a long story. Oh my God.
They did actually figure out a solution to it, though.
Did they? What?
So at this point, I understand from a bill that was passed last year, they're going to eliminate that permit after they get a road. They're going to get the curve improved.
Oh,
The
no
argument
kidding.
that they've used is there's a curve that goes
Right,
through town that the
right.
trucks would cross over the yellow lines.
Well,
So they're
they had an
gonna fix that.
opportunity many years ago to have a bypass, and they turned it down. So as much as every once in a while, I bite my tongue going, you had your chance. We were going to pay for a bypass.
Well, they passionately love the permit, and there's a number of those permits. I'm not just picking on
Yeah.
on Woodstock, but you've got the municipal overweight permits that some towns
right.
enforce and
Yeah.
some towns don't. And so those are all challenges that we were talking about my cousin yesterday who went through that, and he went out to Salt Lake City, took some training, got a CDL. Did it for a while, and it just becomes challenging. So that's why they pay
Yeah.
the big bucks.
Well, they do. And no, seriously, I have to tell one story. I'm watching the clock. Bruce and I were visiting somebody in the hospital down in Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and we stopped off for lunch. And he was at the time a captain from state police, and I'm commissioner of motor vehicles. And across in the booth were two truck drivers faking their logs. And they were busy writing them, and we're watching this. So on the way out, we went over and we said, gentlemen, we put our business cards down and said, I hope you are not coming north. And we walked out. Oh my God, I thought they were going to have a stroke.
Well, I don't want to sound like I'm lamenting those rules because they're important for public
Right,
safety.
right.
I mean, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, you can't. There's no way you can drive a certain amount of hours in a truck and be at your best. You have to rest. So, anyway, we were hysterical. I thought they'd have a heart attack, the both of them. But anyway, so what? So is it? I guess with all this, I mean, you've listed a million things that are going not so good, but it's still progressing along, still moving along. We're still keeping people busy. I mean, construction-wise, there's things happening everywhere.
Yeah, no, this is actually a good story. I mean, when I think about the last 2 years, I don't know if we had on our list. I gave you the pin about the chapter of the year. We saw the last 2 years as an amazing moment for the Associated General Contractors
Great.
and the people that we represent. You go back to the advent of COVID in March of 2020 when we were all sent home, and
Right.
the contractors in Vermont were the only contractors that were sent home in the United States. Every other state in the union allowed road construction, building construction to continue as an essential business.
Who stopped it?
We just, our executive order included every
Oh, no kidding.
in-person business.
Ah, okay.
So we saw that, and me and my board of directors and superiors got together and said, well, what are we going to do to write our own story during this,
Right.
and not be the fly and be the proverbial windshield with this. And what we did was we attacked it by putting together a task force of our members, and also included our electrical division.
Right.
And what we did was working with CDC, working with Vermont Department of Health, and going back to when we dealt with SARS. Remember
Oh, wow,
that,
yes,
right?
I remember that.
So using some of this old data that we had, the new data that we were getting, we put together the first in Vermont, and arguably the first in the United States, COVID return to work action exposure plan, which eventually we got approved through the Vermont Restart Committee, which was ACCD, admin, and everybody. They approved us to start training that. So we created a training program that
for you
we
guys.
started training what we called COVID safety resource officers. So every single job site would get a COVID safety resource officer, and their job was to make sure that work was going appropriately, people were wearing the masks, people were disinfecting, people were staying apart,
Great.
operating their piece. It worked so well that VOSHA didn't tell us this, but we couldn't help but notice that the VOSHA document, if you had ever seen it, that they put up for their safety and
yours?
exposures
Very similar?
looked very similar. We weren't looking for any royalties,
Yeah.
so we won't hold any hard feelings on it. But what we were able to do with that was within a couple of weeks of training our people, all of a sudden the spigot started to open.
Great.
And we were able to get 2 people out on a job site, then 5 people out on a
Good.
job site. And we brought these people. So I'm going to say this was great for the owners, but you know who it was really great for was the people that were the working people
Right,
that were
who want to
collecting
work.
a paycheck.
Right.
When their friends and other family members were at home on unemployment, they weren't enjoying the life that they had been leading,
Right,
right?
right.
Like you can't go buy a car on unemployment. Mortgage lender's going to
Right.
give you a mortgage loan
Right.
if you're on unemployment. So these people got to come back to work, do their job, provide for their families, and take pride in the fact that they were continuing to build Vermont.
I'm just surprised that I don't know where my head was at, but if you're outside, it's less of a problem for COVID than inside in work. I get the work environment where around the water cooler, that's not a good thing. But if you're out on Route 4, it's less of a threat.
Well, that wasn't necessarily our concern, right? So we looked at it from the COVID safety resource officer training included not just while you're at the job site,
Right.
include the ride on to work to the job site.
True, right.
Do I continue to stop at my normal coffee shop and go
Yeah,
in and
okay,
pump the coffee
right.
and then touch at the time we didn't know anything about COVID. Like we thought we were going to go in and touch everything that we touched had COVID all
Right,
over it and
exactly, right.
So we were helping coach people, make your coffee at home, right?
Bring it with you.
Don't
Right.
You're wearing your mask at work. That's great. Don't go to a party with 50 friends on the weekend,
Yep.
So it was this different stuff, and we were very happy in the results that we saw. We were told that we were the lowest level of transmission out of any other business vertical.
That's
With
great.
the exception of the ones that were working remotely, of course.
Yeah, I like that. It'd be interesting to see when this is finally declared over, if ever, what the world will look like. I mean, how many people will still continue, excuse me. By the way, I've taken a COVID test. I do not have COVID. So I keep testing myself, but it's just a cold. But I think my life's, I've had colds before, and I'm doing things differently now with this cold than I did before because of COVID's awareness of germs and stuff, and I think it'll be interesting to see what changes in the workplace.
I mean, I've adopted using hand sanitizer
Oh,
all
yeah,
the time.
for sure.
Like
It's all over my
I didn't
car.
realize this. Like when I have it in my car and I like get some French fries or something, I get
Right,
grease all
right.
over my hands. Now I can just use the alcohol and
Yeah,
get it right off.
done.
And don't
Yeah.
have grease everywhere.
I
So
know.
there are other great things besides my eating habits. I think about the opportunities for some of the people that we work with. You know, whether it's like the miner or whether it's somebody that's working out in the roads outside all day long, we had to adopt a new way to train people. So we had to start out with,
Right.
and we did for all of 2020 and at least the beginning of 2021 before people started to get vaccinated, we were doing 100% remote trainings with people that had never touched a computer before.
Yep. Ah.
So we had Debbie in our office. She was the on-call. I would call her tech support, but it was probably more moral support than
Yeah,
anything
right,
else.
yeah.
You know, we had, you know, people that, you know, grew up, they worked in pits, you know,
Yeah.
working with aggregate all day long in these big machines. Never used a machine that was that big. I mean, they just,
For sure.
so we were meeting people's spouses, their children. We met everybody's pets as they were walking by the screen. And the neat thing was, while we were developing this program, inadvertently we were training people in technology that they were now forced to
Right,
use,
right.
that they are now, these companies that are employing them, were like, wait a second, we can help train them online. And we even have, you know, several companies that have partnered with online training programs to say, hey, if you want to advance and you want to go run your own training track, you go learn, and that makes you available
great.
for other jobs as you learn
Great.
more and more data.
That's
So
great.
it was like, it was mostly bad COVID, but there are some good things that came out, you know?
Yeah. Well, we'll see when it's going to be over soon. I know it. I just know it. So you've been talking a lot about safety, and that's something that's very big for AGC, of course. And you've got workplace safety. You've got we talk about drug testing. There's all kinds. And well, I was just talking about the truckers, about just being alert and aware and healthy. What do you guys do mostly? And you work with OSHA and VOSHA. OSHA's the national. OSHA's Vermont's version of OSHA.
Yeah, so I think there's 12 or 13 states that have a
Yeah.
local
Oh,
deal.
I didn't know. I thought that was universal, but not.
No, not
Oh,
every
interesting.
state. Like Massachusetts, for example, is a national OSHA.
It's an OSHA.
And they
okay.
cover, that office in Massachusetts covers most of New England, and they would cover us, but for we do have a
Oh, I
local
see. Okay.
OSHA
right.
office.
So, what do you guys mostly focus on workplace safety?
So we have our core curriculum and training, which again is the OSHA 10 hour, which is the intro. The
Right.
OSHA 30 hour is generally more designed towards like a foreman or a supervisor. We do specific trainings on like fall protection, which is probably one of the most
biggest.
highly cited
Right.
violations. Confined space training is huge for us. I mean, you think about the idea of crawling into a manhole isn't just, or can you say manhole anymore? A person
Oh, I don't
hole.
know. Person hole. I don't know. But I think they still do manhole, I hope. I would not take offense.
Okay.
You can have it.
So it's not just like climbing down a ladder. There's dangerous chemicals, other things that
For
can hurt
sure.
and kill you.
Right.
So, and then we also have like trenching training. We've also moved out of just some of those basic trainings and actually gone to do, whether they're a company specified day or company request, where they'll ask us to come out and we'll consult with them on their construction site for two things. One, to notice any kind of safety best practices that they can instill. And then two, we can come out and do a mock OSHA inspection,
Right.
because we know what they look for. And then make sure that they are, not standing in the mud. No pun
Well, and I
intended.
think, and it's incumbent upon the drivers to pay attention to the speed in construction zones. WCAX, this was 100 years ago, asked me to do a video for them out on a construction site. And I have never been on the road in a construction site. I could not believe the feeling of the trucks on the pavement where I'm sitting at a desk. It was a commercial, sitting at a desk, and these trucks are whizzing by me. And the vibration was unbelievable that these people work with all day long. And it must take a half a second for something to go very wrong if they're not paying attention. And that is just so tragic. People really need to understand the impact of what the heck they're doing. You know.
Well,
I almost come to a stop sometimes. I'm so aware of it, I go so slow because I just know, I bit one time, like I'm talking like an expert, but these guys are out there 24/7 and it's ridiculous what people do.
Well, you just touched on something that I'm fairly passionate about. Not fairly, extremely passionate
for you.
about. I was like most people in the world before I came to work with the Associated General Contractors in that I didn't see workers in work zones. I saw big yellow trucks
Right,
and
and
orange
annoying,
signs.
right.
My delay that I couldn't possibly deal with, right?
Right.
And only until I started meeting them, and we do traffic control training
Right.
at the AGC, where I get to meet these folks. Again, we work with the owner-operators of the companies, and it was my first summer working at AGC, and my supervisor had to, and I was new at this point, okay? He had to go to a national conference and basically came in and handed me a note and said, these are your code red people you have to call if you have a code red. I was like, code red, okay, I'll put it up on the wall.
Right.
And then, he was no sooner did he get on the plane, he was up on the plane on the way to California, and I got a call from Lisa Donahue, who owned a traffic control company here in the Barrie area. And she was very upset, and she had just lost somebody in the field.
Oh, wow.
And I spent some time on the phone, a significant amount of time. I was not her first call, but we were her second call after she called the police.
Yeah.
And it really became, trying to help her, figure out what the next steps were, the human toll that had been
For sure.
dealt. And I agreed at that point with her that I was going to make work zone safety a priority, because right now, this may come as a surprise to you, but there's almost no traffic enforcement that exists within a work zone. So according to the standards and specification manual that VTrans holds, a hired police officer can do one of three different things on the contract. One is they can help set up the traffic zone, put up cones and such.
Right.
Two is they can direct traffic with flags at intersections. And three is passive enforcement, meaning that's the blue light that you see sitting there.
Right.
And I learned not long after that phone call that blue light can't leave. That blue light has to stay there. You can drive by, I'm sorry to say this on television, but you can drive by that as fast as you want, and they're not going to follow.
And they can't follow you and nail you.
Right.
Whoa.
If there was another police officer that was in the area randomly and saw you do that, they could pull you over. And very, very infrequently, they do combined patrols, and towns have different rules, of course.
Right.
But in general, one of the things that I've been looking for is to try to create more enforcement within those work zones.
Yes, that's just wrong.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, and it becomes frustrating for us, is that we do have legislators that are happy to help and are working towards some solutions, and we're working on some now. And on the other side, there's a group that want us to do more training. So we're training our flaggers to do better, right? Do your job better. Wear more highly reflective material. Follow a system while we're doing it. And those expectations and requirements keep growing while we're not necessarily asking the same over here from our traveling public. So we're really actively trying to figure out some method of enforcement, whether it be hiring more police officers, giving them a fourth duty of being able to pull people over.
For sure.
Or even some sort of automated system. And we think that's important because asking them to get better all the time isn't going to make them safer.
Right.
If people don't slow down.
I'm for that. I'd support whatever you wanted to do. We would advertise it on this show. That's just wrong, because really I was there maybe an hour, but between the noise in your ear, the deafening sound in your ear, the stuff you're breathing in, good only knows what the heck you're breathing in, and the vibrations, working in that environment is not easy. Well,
and I got to meet the whole family, and it was James Alger having that job was, and flagging pays a lot of money and has great benefits, by the way. Yeah. It was the method for the family to reach their goals. So in addition to the human toll, it was meeting mom,
terrible.
Meeting his children.
Your first few weeks on the job. That's
so we're passionate about that.
I bet. Well, I could tell from your face that I struck a little chord. So I'm glad I did, because you really need to, and it's coming upon us soon. Yeah. The season.
Believe me, I see them now.
Huh?
I see
Oh,
them
I
now.
bet you do. So I also saw MSHA refresher courses. That's the
Mining
mine.
Safe Health Administration.
Explain that to me in Vermont.
So under Msha, which is a federal group.
Oh, Msha, okay.
So it's the mining version of OSHA.
Right.
So they take the OSHA general rules and they have customized it for working in a mine or a pit. So
A pit. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we don't really have a lot of mines
Yeah, no,
per se.
I was struggling with that one. I thought I have to ask what the heck you're training.
Yeah, no, we don't have strip mining and all that
Right.
stuff here. We generally have pits, is
Yeah,
what they
okay,
call them in
yeah.
Vermont. But a pit is a very, very broad description, so it ropes a lot of people in.
Yeah.
What the MSHA training really is, it's an annual safety refresher that they have to come in for to maintain their ability to do that job. It's very well cited that mining or working in a pit, using the crushers, using those different pieces of equipment that run on electricity, where there's lots of water around and other dangerous hazards that you
Yeah.
could possibly think of. It's a little higher stakes down there. So they actually have to come in once a year for that refresher training, whereas like your OSHA 10 training,
Yeah.
it's going to last. It's federally recognized for, I believe, 3 to 5 years.
So is that like the quarries?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anybody that
Because
works
like
in a
Rock of
quarry.
Ages and now those are pits.
Definitely.
And I'm sure I'm just thinking of when I ride over there and you see the guys working on the wall face of the pit. That's a little hairy.
I have the utmost respect for those individuals.
Yeah, I bet. Oh my gosh. So, and I love flagging. Bill McManus, I hope he watches this. He used to come in my office. I decided that's what I wanted to do when I was working in prison, and I practiced. You go, nope, don't have it yet. How you turn your wrist to flag, but that's a serious job too.
Yeah, it's
'Cause
not.
The public is not very nice sometimes, and they really should learn to be respectful.
I've heard lots of stories that are
Oh, I bet.
frustrating.
I bet. So, I am watching the clock because there is a topic I have to talk about, which will make me, speaking of crazy, independent contractors.
Oh, okay.
Is that one of yours that you're watching? What is happening? I heard it's up again. Are they dealing with independent contractors, or have they resolved that issue?
So this is a big question.
Right.
I can get it done.
You can get it done. It
So-
just drives me crazy.
So in my industry, we don't run up against that challenge as much in the commercial, industrial, state work world.
okay.
Definitely with the state work, all the job positions and classifications are either when you're dealing with the state, you're either falling under the prevailing wage law,
Right.
or you're
Davis-
falling under the Davis-Bacon
Davis-Bacon,
Act.
right.
So that requires us to do reporting for staff. And then when you look at a larger general contractor, like a Du Bois or a SD Ireland or
Right.
something like that, these are big established businesses that do multi-million-dollar projects. So generally they're working with the employee world, and then a sub who it would be another
Right.
large established company.
Right.
And there's reasons for this. It's the vicarious liability that goes down the chain. If I, as a large established group, hire a subcontractor that's not paying a minimum wage or the prevailing wage or following the UI laws or whatnot, I'm liable for that. It's a little different over in the home builders world.
Okay.
In the home builders world, it is a lot less homogenous, I guess, meaning it's not uncommon practice in the home building world for me to start Matt's home building company,
Right,
and I work with an architect that helps me with the design, and then I hire some of my laborers to do basic labor like framing or something like that. But then I might hire a painting service. And then I might hire somebody that's a pro in kitchens. I may hire
Right,
Kitchen World to
right.
come over. Or I may hire someone that's a pro in crown molding or granite carving, for example. So I may hire all these different subs, and that's quite normal in the housing industry.
Right.
And actually, another way that it spawned itself was you would get essentially partnerships of people working together under one GC, and everybody
Right,
would contribute
right.
their own piece.
One-stop shopping, right?
Yeah. So for some labor advocates, and I to some degree agree in part that people who are treating someone as an employee need to treat them 100% as an employee, or if they're
Right.
treating them as a contractor, they need to treat them
100%.
as 100% of a contractor. And we have pretty clear ABC rules that the Department of Labor has tried to establish. And it just basically says that, as an independent contractor, you're working under a contract. There are general expectations, but you make your own hours.
Right.
You supply your own tools and equipment. You're in charge of your contract. The only thing that the general contractor should be worried about is the finished product. Whereas an employee, you have your hours, you have your minimum wages, you have your unemployment insurance, you have your workers' comp.
Right.
So what we've seen here in Vermont is that, recently, about 7-8 years ago, there was a large case that involved a builder, I won't name any names, from northern Vermont, who had 5 misclassification cases that were being pursued by the Attorney General's office. So they went to court, and ultimately in court, they won 2 out of the 5 cases. They won because the individuals were holding themselves out as a business by holding an LLC.
Okay. Right.
So in the Vermont Supreme Court's opinion, those 2 were holding themselves out as a business. Those other 3 should have been paid as employees.
Okay.
So the legislature reacted and responded to that by creating another level of enforcement for employee misclassification that we got involved with, because at first it was very onerous. Every well-intentioned policy in the world starts out needing a lot of education.
Right.
And so the first way that it went together would have been that I, as an employee, if I had claimed a misclassification issue, I could have gone to both DOL and I could have gone to AG's office, filed 2 separate complaints that would have had 2 separate potential outcomes and 2 separate sets of penalties for the employer. What we were able to do after a bunch of negotiating, and as we do in Montpelier, put together a bill that was passable, created a system that I think is logical there. And nobody walked away happy, which is usually a good sign. It's a good sign that you've got good policy. But it created a policy that, DOL or AG's office could pick up a case, but that the AG's office would generally look for a more habitual offender.
Right.
And they were to develop a memorandum of understanding about what those rules were. And we thought that that was okay. Flash forward to this year, we saw another bill that was introduced by the Senate that would seek to kill the Supreme Court's decision that they made several years ago by holding out no single-person LLCs with no employees would still, under Vermont law, be considered an employee.
Oh.
Didn't go
regardless
anywhere.
of the fact that the person may actually want to be an independent.
Right.
That was always the people that we were involved with. I want to be independent. I don't want to be an employee.
Well, the home builders introduced a policy idea about 5 years ago, which would be to register through the Office of Professional Regulation home builders that working for a residential property. That bill has been vetoed. It's not passed. I mean, it's been around for 4 years. Just last week, they passed out that bill as a part of the larger housing bill, S226 that passed out. And that would seek to register building contractors, home building contractors that do work over $10,000. So I see that as a little bit of an opportunity for folks, because if you think about like the real estate agents, for example, they're able to work as sole proprietors for a real estate broker. That's because they have a license over at OPR. So now the home, and I don't know if this was by design, but the home builders just created a registry system where someone can go register with OPR as a business. Now, I'm not going to test this, but somebody will test this down the road. Does that mean that I'm not misclassified as an independent contractor? Now I've got an LLC. Now maybe I don't even need the LLC because I'm holding myself out as a business.
Nice.
So we'll see.
Yeah. So what else is keeping you busy up in the legislature this year? Because there's a lot going on housing, and Act 250 is, they've been working on a revised Act 250 bill for a couple of years now, and nothing's happening, I don't think, too much, except this latest one is getting better, I think.
Well, for me, the Act 250, and back from when I was with the real estate organization to where I am today, it's kind of been like watching an episode of your favorite television show over and over again. It has a disappointing ending every single time.
Yeah. They try, but they don't get it.
No, and I think we have, with that particular development law, we get involved with to a certain degree. I mean, we were interested in the road rule.
Right.
That was
You
in this
didn't
most.
support that, did you?
We
or-
didn't support the
Right.
original way the road rule was written until they exempted from the road rule roads that were owned by a municipality or the state.
Oh, okay. That's
You know,
interesting.
we left it for the, you know, the home owners and stuff like
Right,
that to argue
right.
about their long driveways, but, you know, we felt, you know, we got out of the way of it, let's put it
Good,
that way.
right. So I thought they took it out, but maybe back in. I haven't watched it in a day
It
or
went
two.
out a couple of years
Yeah,
ago and it's
it's
come
come
back
back.
in, and the other
Right.
stuff that they're looking for generally is like things like forest fragmentation
Yep.
and stuff like that, which a lot of the developers have a hard time, you know, accepting those. And they're well-intentioned, but it becomes somewhat overly restrictive, and I think that, and I testified before General Housing Committee last week, and I said, you know, it's great that we keep creating all of these Act 250 rewrites in the Natural Resource Committee, but we have to realize that those committees are really focused on the environment. They're not
Right,
necessarily
right.
focused on someone's ability to buy a home.
Yeah.
So, and I say that with respect, that's just not their purview. So when I'm sitting in general housing, maybe that's the committee that should start talking about it, because like with everything in the world, whether you're talking about climate change, whether you're talking about water, whether you're talking about homes and sprawl,
Right.
there's got to be a fine line with what's acceptable in terms of our environment and what we can live
We
with as
can
a.
work together.
Yeah,
When I was in transportation, I created a job that was the liaison between transportation and A&R. And that really helped a lot for our folks to understand what A&R was trying to get at and their goal, and vice versa. And it seemed to help because before nobody was talking. They were all sort of doing their own thing because
We're back there.
I don't think anybody wants to destroy Vermont. I mean, the environment is what makes Vermont Vermont.
Yeah.
So I think any contractor or builder wants to do the right thing, but also wants to be successful and make a profit and do all the things that need to be done. So I don't know, you brought some slides. Is there anything that you'd like us to put up and talk about? And
No, I just
about,
brought some pieces along just in
okay.
case I drew a blank, because I didn't know if I was going to get nervous on your show or
Oh
not,
no,
but
this
I've been
is
very
just,
comfortable.
no, it's
so.
good. Well, because if you want to, we can put it up electronically if there's anything that's of interest of how well you guys are doing. Because you won, I couldn't find it in my notes, but you were awarded from the national AGC, the AGC of the Year award.
Yeah, we're the #1 chapter for AGCs. There's 3 divisions, small, medium, and large. So we don't compete with New York State.
Yeah, well,
They're a
that's
little
okay.
bigger.
We're
But
special.
We beat 90 other AGCs out for
Great.
state and local boards. And I think a huge part of that was our COVID return to work program.
I was going to ask you when you were talking about that. That must have helped to solidify the award.
Yeah, I mean,
You know.
it was such a great story. You fill out a application for these things, and it was such an easy story for us
Right.
to tell. I mean, we were given that COVID safety course, and all of a sudden, I've got retail stores are coming to it.
Great.
I had we got key areas were coming to it. I even trained daycares. Personally trained
Well,
a daycare
our
or two
children, that's
on how to deal with
important.
COVID in the
That's
daycare.
great.
I don't know that I'm necessarily the authority in that. My PhD or whatever is long gone.
Well, but the kids are our future, as they say. So and they're struggling as well during this COVID thing.
Yeah.
So we've run out of time, and it has been an absolute pleasure.
Indeed.
AGC is a great organization. Check out their website. Good group of folks, and you've been in business a long time.
1961 for our
Yeah.
local chapter, and if you go back, James E. Cashman, who was one of the major builders of Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah, I know that
Is
name.
one of the original founders of the AGC, and in fact, one of the awards is named after James Cashman, is the one that we're going for this year, which is the increase in membership.
Excellent, good for you. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you all for tuning in, and in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.